He was a king bleeding silver beneath his crown. She was a widow who walked into Sarong Tower carrying a bucket of water and a secret that could end a kingdom, Iron Fang. A wolf kingdom carved from bloodstone, an alpha king who hasn't shifted in 4 moons. Poisoned, hunted, weeks from a forced royal treaty. And the smiling lord beside his throne has been planning his death for 30 years. She sees the wound before she sees the crown. He lowers his sword. Her small daughter draws him as a wolf with a bird tucked between his paws. The king who never breaks, almost does, as a sacred ring of black stones, an ivory blade rising. Wolves howling across the city. A widow running into treason with a kitchen knife. A brother returned from a false grave. He whispered, "If I ever call you by another name, do not answer." The throne of Iron Fang was carved from black bloodstone, older than any wolf who had ever bent knee before it, older than the castle itself, older than the first wolf-hide banner ever hung above its high arch. King Rhaegor Wolfsbane sat on it now. 34 winters carved into his jaw, shoulders like a war banner pulled tight across the crossbeam of a gallows. He had ruled 4 years. 4 years of nodding at the right times. 4 years of clenching the armrests when the pain in his ribs whispered up his spine like fire crawling a rope. Tonight the council had droned for hours. Grain tariffs, border patrols, a minor lord in the south with too many wolf hounds and not enough sons. Rhaegor listened, or pretended to, because underneath the plated black leather, underneath the wolf fur mantle, underneath the layered silk shirt he had worn since noon, a silver and dragonhide brace bit into his lower ribs like a second skeleton. And it was the only thing keeping him upright. 4 months. 4 months since the memorial for his father. 4 months since the goblet of Wolfsbane wine had touched his lips at that funeral feast. 4 months of not being able to shift, not once. Not into the great white wool his people expected. Not into the shape carved onto every coin, every banner, every mother's lullaby about Iron Fang. He could feel it inside him, somewhere, curled, silent, poisoned, but when he reached for it, nothing. Just silver in his blood, just the taste of coins in his mouth. Only Elder Hoarfrost knew, the old mage, the only man Rhaegor still trusted, and even that trust felt like a rope fraying above a well. Lord Vareth Grimwald was speaking now. Something about the treaty envoys arriving in 6 weeks. About the border kingdom of Stagholm sending their princess. About peace. About sons. About legacy. Rhaegor watched Grimwald's mouth move. 58 years old, that man. Silver-braided beard. Rings on every finger. The kindly uncle voice that had cradled Rhaegor since his coronation. And a smile that never quite reached the eyes. I do not trust him. The thought landed sudden. Cold. Like something dropping into snow. I do not know why. I never have. The council rose. The council bowed. The council filed out of the great hall like men who had never once had to hold their own weight up on nothing but a strap of dragonhide and prayer. Rhaegor did not rise. Not yet. Not until the doors sealed shut with that long, low grind of iron on stone. Not until the guards outside called the changing of the watch. Then, and only then, he allowed his shoulders to fall. The pain crested. Immediate, merciless. It rolled up his rib cage and lodged somewhere in his heart like a knife someone had forgotten to pull out. A king does not gasp. A king does not weep. A king does not lean forward until his forehead nearly touches the arm of his own throne. Except tonight. Tonight, he did all 3. He sat there in the empty hall until the torches burned low. Until the shadow of the great wolf crest on the far wall stretched thin across the flagstones. He counted his own breathing. He counted the beats between the throbs in his ribs. He counted the days remaining until the treaty. 42. He had counted every night for 4 months. The number always answered him the same way. Not enough. Have you ever carried a wound so heavy you would kill a stranger just to keep it hidden? That is the question this story asks. That is the question a king asks himself in the still hours before dawn. It is the question a widowed woman is about to walk into. She does not know it yet. She is only bringing water. Somewhere down in the low kitchens, she is filling a bucket. Somewhere in the corridors between the servants' hall and the East Tower stair, a steward with the rings on his fingers is deciding to send her up the wrong staircase. Rhaegar pushed himself off the throne with both arms. He walked to the East Tower on his own. He would not be carried. He would not be helped. He would not have his groom see him limp. He passed the outer guard with a nod. He climbed the winding stair one careful step at a time. He counted them. 42. For that number again. He almost laughed. The tower was warm when he closed the door behind him. Fire lit. Bed turned down. Basin filled. All of it done by hands that had been in and out of the chamber before he arrived. That was Hoarfrost. That was the old mage taking care of him without ever making him say the words. He crossed to the fire. He shrugged off the wolf fur mantle. He unlaced the silk shirt with hands that could no longer make small knots without shaking. He waited for Hoarfrost. The old man would come. The old man always came at the fourth bellal of night. The old man would tighten the ratchets, bleed the seam, change the padding, whispers the small prayers to the forest gods that even a mage did not fully believe in anymore. Except the fourth bell rang. Hoarfrost did not come. The fifth bell rang. Hoarfrost did not come. And Rhaegar Wolfsbane was standing in his east tower, with a brace clamped around his ribs, and no hand in the castle he trusted to touch it. And the wolf inside him was quiet. Too quiet. And the poison in his blood was moving, and the wound in his back had reopened at some point during the last hour of council. He could feel it, warm, wet, as a slow seep under the plate. He sat down on the low chair by the fire. He waited. He listened to the wind at the tower window, and somewhere on the other side of the tower door, down the winding stair, across the outer landing, a bucket clattered. Elder Hoarfrost had not come. Because Elder Hoarfrost was at that same moment unconscious on the flagstones of his own study 2 towers away. Struck from behind. Struck by a hand in Arvin's glove that had known exactly where the old skull was thinnest. Rhaegar did not yet know that Rhaegar only knew the bucket. The bucket sound was small. Tinny, a wooden pail with an iron rim striking one of the outer landing stones. Then a soft indrawn breath. Then bare butts on cold stone. Then silence. Nobody came to the East Tower without permission. That was the rule. That had been the rule for 4 years. Even the chambermaids waited on the outer landing until the king's groom opened the inner door. Because Rhaegar was a king who had trained his household to knock. Twice. Long pause, then twice more. Anything else and the household had learned to withdraw and wait. There had been no pause twice. There had only been a bucket and boots. Rhaegar's hand closed on the sword, propped against the pillar beside the fire. Not the ceremonial blade. Not the coronation sword. The old campaign short sword he still slept beside from his prince days. Iron, unjeweled, heavier than it looked. The kind of blade a man kept because it was honest. The pain in his ribs howled at him. He ignored it. The door swung open. She was not looking. That was the thing. She was looking down, at her own boots, at the bucket, at the wet trail of water she had left across the tower landing. Her hair was the color of dark wheat, and it fell forward over one cheek. Her apron was gray with a scorch mark near the hem, where some kitchen fire had licked her once and lost. She stepped in 3 paces before she looked up, and froze. Not a scream, not a gasp. Not the shriek of a maid who has walked in on her king. Nothing that dramatic. Just a small tightening of the mouth. Just the bucket still in her hand, tilting a little, sloshing a little. Just her eyes going to his ribs. Straight there. Fast. Like a healer's eyes going to a wound, not like a woman's eyes going to a naked man. That was what stopped him from swinging the sword. She did not step back. She did not run. She set the bucket down, slowly, like a person setting down a lantern in a room full of powder. And she went to one knee, right there on the cold stone, head bowed, hands flat on her thighs. My lord. Her voice was low, steady. Your ribs are bleeding silver. Rhaegar did not lower the sword. He did not raise it either. Who are you? Melis Thornhollow, my lord. Night servant. Kitchens. Who told you to come to this tower? The steward, my lord. He said the east tower needed fresh water for the basin. Who is the steward? Traster Corwin, my lord. Rhaegar made a note. Corwin had been steward for 20 years. Corwin had been chosen by Grimwald, of course. He stepped closer. Sword lowered but not sheathed. She did not lift her head. He crouched. His ribs howled. He set the sword flat across his knee. He was close enough now to see her eyelashes, close enough to smell the kitchen smoke on her. Look at me. She looked. Her eyes were gray, not silver, not steel. Gray like a cold morning on the northern lakes. And they were not afraid. That was the strange part. She was frightened. He could feel it. Her hands trembled on her thighs. But her eyes had already decided something before her mouth got there. You said silver. He kept his voice quiet. What do you mean by silver? Silver wolfsbane, my lord. My father was a healer at the border. I saw it 3 times when I was a girl. My husband died from it 4 years ago. I know the smell. Rhaegar's throat closed. Say that again. My husband died from it. 4 years ago. 4 years ago, the border war had ended. 4 years ago, a peace treaty had been signed on the same stone table the council still used. 4 years ago, Rhaegar had still been alive, and Rhaegar's father had still been a prince, and had still been able to shift into the Wolfsfalls and see and had still slept without needing dragonhide to hold his ribs together. And 4 years ago, some border villager named Thornhollow had died of the same silver poison now creeping through the king of Iron Fang's ribs. He looked at her for a long time. You are certain? I nursed him 11 days. I know how it moves. I know soup smells. I know how it leaves the mouth, my lord. She swallowed. I know how it kills. Rhaegar stood up. His ribs screamed. He ignored them because he had just realized something. Something small. Something enormous. Something that turned his throat to iron. His hand was steady now. She had made his hand steady. He locked the door. He drew the curtain. He set the sword on the small table by the fire. He told her to stand. She stood. She kept her hands at her sides. She did not look at his chest again. That, too, told him something. A woman with less discipline would have stolen a look. A woman with more fear would have kept her head down. Melis Thornhollow looked at his face, only his face, sit. He gestured at the low chair opposite the one he had left. She sat, rigid, hands folded on her lap. The scorch mark on her apron flickered in the light. Rhaegar took the seat opposite. He reached for the wolf hide throw across the back of the chair and pulled it across his shoulders. Some part of him refused to make her sit through this half-covered. That part of him surprised him. He had not known that part was still alive. Your husband. He kept his voice low. Tell me about him. His name was Aldrich. He was 32 when he died. He was a woodsman on the border of Stagholm. He had been recruited to help track a rogue pack that was killing farmers. He came home from the tracking party sick. Fevers, silver rings in the whites of his eyes. 11 days later he was gone. Rhaegar's hand closed on the arm of the chair Aldrich. That was his brother's name, Aldrich Wolfsbane. Third-born prince, dead in infancy, according to every court record. Buried in the royal crypt beside their mother, according to every court record. Rhaegar's mouth went dry, except he kept his face still. A king learns that early. A king learns to keep the face still, even when the heart is running. Do you have a token of him? He asked it carefully. A ring, a locket, a blade. Her eyes went wet, not tears. Just the shine of a woman who has been asked about a dead man too soon after the day. I have his knife, my lord. It is in a chest under my daughter's bed. Bring it to me tomorrow. She nodded. She did not ask why. She was a woman who had learned that asking why cost more than doing. He liked that in her. He hated that he liked that in her, because it meant she had learned it the way people learned it. With bruises, with losses, with a small daughter to feed your daughter. He kept it neutral. How old? 7, my lord. Her name is Wren. Wren. That was the name of the small brown bird that nested in the eaves of the East Tower every spring. That was the name a mother might give to a child born small, a child born fragile. Is she well? The pause was very short, but Rhaegar caught it. She has the lung sickness, my lord. Since she was 3, there is a herb that helps her, moonbell. It grows in the high pastures. It is expensive. How expensive? I earn 8 coppers a week, my lord. A bundle of dried moonbell is 30 coppers. Rhaegar did the arithmetic in his head. He did it 3 times. He did not trust the answer any of the 3. She was working in his castle, serving in the kitchens at 8 coppers a week. And her daughter was choking to death, 2 floors below the throne room, because she could not afford a herb that grew a day's rise from the palace gate. He was going to buy that herb. He was going to buy every bundle of it in the kingdom. That was the first decision he made. Before he thought it through, before he had a plan, he would buy it, whatever the cost. He said nothing about it yet. He kept his face still. A king's face. Melis was watching him now. Just a little. Careful. Like someone watching a lantern flame in a barn full of hay. She had realized something too. He could see it. She had realized that she had said too much. She had let him see the softest place in her. And now she was calculating what he might do with it. He hated that. He hated that she had to calculate. He hated that his throne had made calculation the price of speaking to him. Melis Thornhollow. He said her full name, slow, careful. He said it like a man signing his own name to a contract he had not yet read. Yes, my lord. I am going to offer you something. He watched her. Before I offer it, I want you to know that you may refuse. If you refuse, you will leave this tower alive. I will make certain of it. I will not touch you, and I will not send anyone else to touch you. Do you understand? Yes, my lord. But if you accept, he paused. If you accept, you will belong to me for 6 weeks. Not in the way a lord takes a maid to his bed. He said it plain. I mean in the way a soldier belongs to an oath. The color moved in her face. Shame me something in between. Go, my lord. The men who serve me. The men who tightened this brace. He touched the silver and dragonhide thing under the wolf hide. There are only 2 of them. One is Elder Hoarfrost, who is 83 and cannot lift a bucket of water without his hands going white. The other is my personal groom, who is loyal, but who I have begun to suspect is being watched. I need a 3rd pair of hands. I need hands that know Silver Wolfsbane. I need hands that will not carry my secret to Grimwald. Grimwald. She said the name flat. Careful. You know him. Every servant knows him, my lord. What does every servant say of him? That his rings cost more than his loyalty. Rhaegar almost smiled. He did not. But he almost did. That is an accurate counting. He leaned forward. The fire cocked the last light in his eyes for a moment. Old wolf light. Almost gone. 100 gold pieces a week. He said it clean. That is 100 years of your wages. Every moonbell bundle in Iron Fang for your daughter. A physician for her. A tutor if she wants one. A private chamber in the servant's wing so you do not have to walk home in the cold to her every night. And 6 weeks of silence. Her mouth opened, closed, opened again, 6 weeks. Then what? Then the treaty is signed. Then I am either healed or dead. Then, either way, you are released. If I live, you and your daughter walk out of this castle with more gold in your apron than you can spend in 3 lifetimes. If I die, he paused. If I die, you burn the contract. You take Ren south. You cross the border into Stagholm, and you do not stop until you reach the coast. And you spend a life pretending you never saw the East Tower at all. She was quiet for a long time. The fire popped. The wind at the tower window keened low and long the way winter wind does when it is asking to come in. Why me? Because you did not scream. Any woman would not have screamed. If she was a servant, she would have known better. Rhaegar shook his head. Any woman would have looked away. You looked at the wound. She swallowed. That is not a good reason to trust me. It is the only reason. He said it plain. And it is the best one I have. She looked at the floor. She looked at the brace under the wolf hide. She looked at her own hands. She thought about her daughter 2 floors below, curled on a straw mat, Wheezing, she thought about the last bundle of moonbells she had bought. It had cost her 4 weeks of wages. It had lasted 11 days. She thought about the winter coming. "Give me until morning, my lord." He shook his head. "I need the answer now." "Why?" "Because Grimwald has a spy in this castle. And if you leave this tower without an answer, I will have to assume you are that spy. And I do not wish to assume that of you." She looked up sharp, her gray eyes bright. The insult stung her more than the offer had. "I am not his spy, my lord." "You know." "Then why?" "Because I am a king with a poisoned ribcage and 6 weeks left." He said it flat. "I do not have the luxury of waiting to be certain." She was very quiet. She was very still. She said one word, "Yes." Rhaegar closed his eyes. He had not realized until that moment how much of him had been holding his breath, waiting for her to say it. He drew up the contract himself, on dragonhide parchment. In his own hand, he wrote it slow, each letter deliberate. He signed it with the small dagger he kept at his hip, opening a thin cut on his left thumb and pressing the print to the bottom of the page. Then he passed the parchment to her. She could not write. He had guessed that. He held the dagger out to her handle first. She looked at it, then at him, then at the parchment. She took the dagger. She opened her thumb. The blood beaded quick. She pressed the print beside his. 2 prints, side by side, a king's and a widow's. He rolled the parchment. He sealed it. He wrapped it in oilcloth. He put it in the base of the fireside chest where only Elder Hoarfrost knew to look. Then he turned to her. "The steward will be told you are being transferred to the East Tower service. He will not question it. You will not sleep in the servant's wing tonight. You will sleep came up, not in your bed, my lord." Rhaegar almost laughed. "He did not know. Not in my bed." He gestured at the small anteroom off the tower chamber, on a pallet, in there with the door open. "Because if you are here, then Ren cannot be sent to fetch you. I will not have that child crossing the courtyard at night in the cold. I will send for her tomorrow." She stared at him. She was going to cry. He could see it climb up the back of her throat. He looked away out of respect. He gave her the small dignity of not being watched. Her voice when it came was rough. "Yes, my lord." He turned back. He was carefully composed. "One more thing." He held her eyes. "If I ever wake in the night and call you by another name." She waited. "Do not answer to it." "Whose name?" "My lord." He did not answer. He picked up the wolfhide throw. He walked to the anteroom door. He set the throw on the pallet inside. He did not look at her when he spoke. "Go to sleep, Melis. Tomorrow will be long." She went. She curled on the pallet. She pulled the wolfhide up to her chin. She stared at the low ceiling of the anteroom until the fire in the outer chamber burned down to embers. And in the outer chamber, on the great wolf fur bed carved with the crest of a house that had ruled Iron Fang for 700 years, King Rhaegar Wolfsbane lay on his side, brace off for once, ribs bare. And for the first time in 4 months, he did not sleep alone in the East Tower. He did not sleep at all. But he was not alone. That was enough. Somewhere between the 6th bell and the 7th, Hoarfrost was found by his own house steward, blood matted in his silver hair, alive but slow to wake. The steward carried him to the infirmary. The steward said nothing to the king. The steward, whose loyalties Rhaegar would only understand in retrospect, understood that on this particular night, the king had other guardians in place. The steward was old. The steward had served the crown before Grimwald had rings. The steward had waited a long time for night like this. He tended the mage. He held his tongue. He waited for morning. Dawn came slow the way it does in the high country. Gray first, then rose, then the long, low horns of the changing of the guard. Down in the outer courtyard, the steward Corwin was informed by the 2nd bell. Rhaegar delivered the news himself in the corridor outside the great hall. He spoke it clean. New night attendant assigned to the East Tower, transferred from kitchen duty. No further questions. Any inquiry redirected to the king directly. Corwin's mouth did a small thing, a tightening at the corner. A flicker. Rhaegar watched it. Corwin bowed. Corwin withdrew. Rhaegar watched him walk down the corridor. He watched him take the turn toward Grimwald's chambers instead of the servants' hall. Of course. He made a note. By the third bell, Melis had been dressed by the tower seamstress in the black wool cloak of the House Wolfsbane. Not the fine one. Not the ceremonial one. The plainer one. The one given to trusted staff of the royal household. Wolf's head clasped at the throat. Silver piping at the hem. Warm. Unmistakable. Anyone who saw her wear it would know she was under the king's personal protection. That was the point. She stood in the courtyard beside the royal carriage. She was going to fetch Ren from the kitchen's outbuilding. She would ride back with her daughter in the carriage under the king's mark. Nobody would stop her. Nobody would question her. She looked up. He was watching from the balcony of the East Tower. Wolf-hide cloak. Fresh brace under his shirt. Face like winter iron. She raised a hand. Not a wave. Not a bow. Something smaller than either. A recognition. A promise, maybe, from her side of the parchment to his. Rhaegar did not raise his hand back. Kings do not wave. Kings do not need to. But he watched her ride out of the gate. And he stayed at the balcony long after the carriage had disappeared into the streets of the lower city. Because he had just done something a king should never do. He had trusted a stranger with the shape of his death, and he did not yet know if he had saved his own life. Or handed a blade to the next hand that would try to take it. Behind him, the door to the tower stairs creaked open. It was not Hoarfrost. It was the old understeward. The one Corwin had never trusted. The one who knew where the mage was. My lord, Elder Hoarfrost is in the infirmary. He was struck last night. Rhaegar did not turn around. By whom? By hands that wore no rings. The understeward bowed. The understeward left. Rhaegar stood on the balcony a long time. Hoarfrost was awake by the fifth bell of morning. The old mage sat propped against a wall of pillows in the infirmary. A cloth pressed to sack a skull. Skin the color of birch bark. He looked at Rhaegar when the king entered and did not try a stand. I have been a fool. He said it flat. 200 years of study, and I did not think to lock my study door. You are not a fool. You are 83. The blow came from behind. From the north pantry corridor. Corwin's root. I know, then you already suspect. I suspect. Rhaegar sat on the small stool by the bed. Slow. His ribs held. I have suspected for 4 months. Last night, the suspicion put on boots. Hoarfrost looked past him, to the door, to the corridor, to some middle distance where the old mage kept the things he had seen and not unsee. There is more. My king, say it. There is a fresh wolf lily on the plaque of Prince Aldrich. In the crypt. My understeward brought me word yesterday morning. I did not have time to tell you before I was struck. Someone in this castle has been laying a flower on that grave for years, every week. Fresh, never dried, never forgotten. Rhaegar did not move. He did not need to. He already knew. He had known since Melis had spoken her husband's name. Aldrich did not die in that crypt. My king, where did he die? In a woodsman's cottage, 4 years ago. On the border of Stagholm, in the arms of a wife who is now upstairs in my east tower drinking broth by my fire. Hoarfrost closed his eyes, then the girl, my king, the little one. Rhaegar did not answer. He did not need to. The old man had gotten there on his own. You will need proof. Hoarfrost's voice was low. Grimwald has been at this for 30 years. He will not fold to state suspicion. He will fold to a signed hand. Nothing's, then find it. Rhaegar stood. Every wet nurse, every midwife, every priest, every ledger clerk who touched a payment out of the royal treasury in the year my brother was born. I do not care how old they are. I do not care how far they have gone. I do not care what they cost. Find them. Get their names on parchment. Get their marks on wax, if any of them are dead. Find their sons. I will begin today. You will begin now. The old mage bowed his head. It was not surrender. It was assent. The kind of bow one old wolf gives another when the pack has finally begun to move. Rhaegar left the infirmary. He climbed to the east tower. Melis was at the fire. Ren was on the wolf hide by the hearth. Small, serious. Charcoal on her fingers already. She was drawing something on the back of a grain slip. She looked up when Rhaegar came in. "My lord." Her voice was thin. "Reedy, serious as." He stopped. "Little Wren." She smiled a little ill. She had not smiled at him before. Nobody at court had told her his title required curtsies and averted eyes, because nobody at court had known she existed until this morning. She held up the paper. "I made you something." He crouched. His ribs shrieked in protest. He ignored them. He took the paper. She had drawn a wolf, in charcoal, on the back of an old grain slip from the tower kitchen. A white wolf, under a moon, with a small dark bird tucked between the wolf's front paws. He looked at it a long time. He was afraid to speak, because if he spoke, he did not know what would come out of his throat. "The bird." He kept his voice careful. "Who is the bird?" "Me." She looked up at him solemn. "Because my name is a bird." "And the wolf?" "You." "Because you are the king." "Why is the bird between the wolf's paws?" "Because the bird is safe there." She looked at him as though this were the most obvious thing in the world. "Because the wolf is big. So he keeps her warm." Rhaegar did not answer. He could not. She got up. She patted him on the arm. 2 little pats. Like a woman patting a horse. Small mothering hand. Learns from a mother who mothered everything she touched. She trotted off to fetch a fresh piece of charcoal. Rhaegar stayed crouched a long moment, holding the drawing, not moving, because he had just realized something. The girl had drawn him as a wolf. As the wolf. As the wolf he had not been able to become for months. She had drawn him whole. He did not know how to hold that without shaking. Melis was watching him from the hearth. She said nothing. She had already learned that the king of Iron Fang did not need commentary when his hands went still. She only rose, and she brought him a bowl of broth, and she set it on the table beside him, and she said, "Quiet. Drink, before it is cold." He drank the whole bowl. He had not eaten a full meal in 4 months without immediately being sick after. This one held. He did not understand yet why. He would understand by nightfall. The knife. She said it soft. "It is on the table." He looked. It was small. Woodsman's blade, bone handle, the beige yellow. The leather at the guard was worn to a shine. He picked it up. He turned it in his hand, and the world went cold, because carved into the bone. Small, faint, half worn by 4 years of hands, was a mark he had known since he was a boy. 2 crossed running wolves, one above the other. The mark his father had put on every blade he had ever gifted his sons. The mark had been on Rhaegar's first hunting knife. The mark had been on his brother's cradle blade, the one he had watched his mother lay across the pillow beside the infant. The one he had watched the priests carry away with the little body in the little coffin. The one that should be resting in the royal crypt beside a wolf hide the size of a loaf of bread. Except it was here, in his hand, in a tower chamber, in the morning light, attached to a story about a woodsman on the border of Stagholm. He set the knife down, careful, slow, the way a man sets down a lit candle in a room full of straw. "Where did your husband say he got this knife?" Melis looked up. She had caught the tone. "His father, my lord." It had been his father's before him. His father. Rhaegar kept his voice even. "And did his father say how it came to him?" She thought about it. She was careful. He liked that, he said. She was slow. He said his own father had given it to him when he was very small. He said his father was a woodsman too, but that his mother had died when he was still nursing, and that he had been raised by his father's brother in the far border villages. Every word she said was another small hammer coming down on the door of a room Rhaegar had kept locked for 20 years. He held the knife. He looked at Wren by the hearth. He looked at Melis. He looked at the drawing in his hand of a wolf with a bird tucked between his paws. He did not last time. Then he said, "Lo, Melis, your daughter is my brother's blood." Melis went very still. "I know, my lord." He looked up sharp. "You know." "I have known since the second night." Her face was steady. Only her hands moved, small, on the handle of the ladle in the pot. "I saw the mark on the knife when I was 17. My husband told me it was a woodsman's mark. I did not believe him then. I loved him anyway. I never asked again, because he did not want to know what he did not know. Some men do not. And I let him be. That Rhaegar felt something loosen in his chest that had been braced for 4 years. And when you saw me, I saw the same mark on the pommel of the sword you laid across your knee. He almost laughed. He did not, but he did smile. Small, real. For the first time in 4 months, then we are family. Widow Thornhollow. She held his eyes, then let us behave like it. My king. Grimwald had been a busy man that morning. Rhaegar learned the shape of it in pieces through the day. By the 3rd bell, the head of the royal armory had reported a missing seal. By the 4th bell, 2 carts of grain, intended for the western granaries, had been rerouted to a warehouse controlled by a merchant with a Grimwald ledger. By the 5th bell, a rider had been dispatched south, unannounced, without a warrant from the crown. By the 6th bell, a rumor had begun to move in the servants' halls, that the king had taken a widow to his chambers and lost his sense. Rumors did not concern Rhaegar. Rumors that arrived in every corridor within a single afternoon concerned him greatly. Because that speed was the speed of a man who had been prepared. That speed was the speed of a man who had waited for exactly the right pretext to move. Grimwald had been waiting for a woman, any woman. Any excuse. Melis had walked into the East Tower with a bucket of water and had, without meaning to, handed the old lord the flag he had wanted for months. Rhaegar sat in the council chamber that afternoon and watched Grimwald run the room. Grimwald was smooth. He always was. He congratulated the crown on the new attendant with a small warm smile that did not touch the eyes. He raised, gently, the question of whether the East Tower was properly staffed for a king in delicate health. He suggested gently that perhaps a physician of the old school should be brought up from the Western Abbey. He raised, gently, the matter of the treaty envoys and the great weight of proving Iron Fang's stability before Stagholm's arrival. He did not once say the word ordeal. He did not need to. Every lord at the table heard it anyway. Rhaegar let him speak. Rhaegar watched every ring on every finger. Rhaegar made 3 notes in his head and did not write them down. Note 1. Grimwald's left index ring, the heavy black stone signet, tapped the armrest, twice when the western granaries were mentioned. Note 2. Grimwald's right thumb ring, the twisted silver band, spun once when the treaty was mentioned. Note 3. Neither ring moved when the East Tower was mentioned, which meant that of the 3 fronts Grimwald was working, the East Tower was the one he was most confident about. Which meant that of the 3 fronts, the East Tower was the one where he had already placed his knife. Rhaegar adjourned the council. He did not go directly to the tower. He walked the long way, through the outer garden, through the chapel, through the crypt. He stood before the small stone plaque that read Prince Aldrich Wolfsbane. Beloved, beloved. Someone had left a fresh wolf lily on the ledge. Not old, not dried. Fresh. That morning he picked up the lily. He turned it in his hand. He set it back down. Whoever was laying the flower was another player at a table Rhaegar had been sitting at for 20 years, without knowing the rules. But he was quick when he counted. And when a king begins to count, he does not stop. He turned. He left the crypt. He climbed the East Tower stair. Melis was pouring broth again. He had not asked her to. She had simply learned that he came in from the great hall pale, and had learned that broth made him less pale. He sat. He looked at the broth. He looked at her. Widow Thornhollow. Yes, my king. What is in this broth? She frowned. That was not the question she had expected. Beef bone, onion, a little salt, a crushed bulb of winter garlic. Boiled 2 hours in the small copper pot in our kitchen. From my own hand, from my own store. No royal spices, no royal salt. Because the salt in the great kitchen tastes wrong to my tongue, and I have been buying my own from the low market since I arrived. Rhaegar set down the spoon. Slow, Melis. You have been feeding me from your own stores for 3 days. Yes, my king. I did not know if I should say. My apologies. He was already standing, ribs howling. He did not feel them. "I am healing." He said it flat. She looked up. "You said healing." "I said healing." She stood up too. "That is not possible. Silver wolfsbane does not stop. Once it is in the blood, it does not stop. It slows. It plateaus. It never reverses. Unless the source is still present." Rhaegar closed his eyes. Because the source was still present, it had to be. The silver had been seeping through the seam of his brace every morning. That was not the poison from his body coming out. That was the poison coming in. He crossed to the fire. He tore open the wolf hide. He pulled the tunic apart. He undid the top strap of the brace. He worked his fingers under the padding. Melis was already beside him. "Let me." "My lord." She unhooked the ratchets with hands that knew the mechanism now. 2 clicks, 3. The brace came off. She turned it in her hands. She held the padding to the firelight. The padding was faintly silver. She looked up at him. Her face was white. "My king? This has been poisoning you?" "I know. Since when? Since the day my father was buried. Since the day the royal armorer handed this brace to Hoarfrost. Hoarfrost handed this brace to me, and I've been wearing it. Every hour. Every day. For 4 months. She sat down. She sat down on the flagstones. She sat down because her legs would not hold her. Rhaegar Wolfsbane stood in the east tower with the thing that had been slowly killing him held loose in his own hands. And he did not laugh. He did not cry. He did not shout. He looked at the padding. He looked at the seam. He looked at the small silver bloom where the poison had been leaching into his skin 1 heartbeat at a time for 120 days. Then he said one thing. Very quiet. "Grimwald has been patient." Melis looked up at him. "He wanted you weak. On a specific day, in a specific hall, in front of a specific council. I know. He wanted an ordeal. I know. He wanted you to fail it. I know then." She swallowed. "Then he already has 3 days planned. Because you have 3 days until the treaty envoys arrive." Rhaegar looked at the brace in his hands. He looked at the fire. He looked at Ren asleep on the wolf hide by the hearth. He'd looked at Melis on the flagstones. He looked at the drawing of a wolf and a bird tucked between the wolf's paws that was folded now inside the inner pocket of his tunic, directly over his heart. "I need you to build me another." He said it low. Wait. "Clean linen, boiled twice, nothing from your own hands by dawn." "Meet you. Because you are the only pair of hands in this time with no one's eyebrows and so are not for sale." She looked at the brace. She looked at her own hands. She looked at Ren. Then, from the floor, small and steady, she said, "Yes, my king." Melis worked through the night. The tower kitchen was warm. She kept the fire small. She kept the door barred. She worked with the tools of a woman who had once helped a battlefield healer strap chests together with whatever came to hand. She boiled linen. She dried it by the hearth. She measured dragon hide from the outbuilding stores. She pulled copper rivets from an old horse harness. She kept her needle strong and her knots small. She kept Ren asleep on the wolf hide with a small bird carving her father had once whittled for her tucked under one thin hand. Rhaegar did not sleep either. He sat in the outer chamber. He wrote small letters, ciphered. He sent them out one by one before dawn with the understeward. Names of granary lords in the west. Names of old campaign captains who had loved his father. Names of merchants he had extended small kindnesses to in the 4 years of his rule. Not orders, only greetings, only a signal, quiet, to those who had watched Iron Fang from a careful distance for 4 months and had wondered whether their king was still their king. By the second bell of morning, the new brace was on him. She had done it. She had done it in one night, in a tower kitchen, by firelight, without waking her daughter, without waking the castle, with steady hands and no fanfare, and the quiet economy of a woman who had been undoing and redoing everything in her life alone for 4 years. He wore it under a plain wool tunic, under the wolf hide, under a heavier surcoat than he liked, because the day was cold, because the council chamber was colder. Because Verith Grimwald had eyes that could feel the difference between a well-braced king and a merely dressed one at 40 paces. Grimwald was already seated when Rhaegor came in. The old lord's smile was warm. His rings caught the torchlight. "My king, you look rested." The high country air, rested and ready. That is what a treaty envoy will want to see in 3 days. 3 days is a long time. Rhaegar kept his voice smooth. Anything might change in 3 days, or nothing might. Grimwald folded his hands. Some kingdoms drift. Some kingdoms decide. Which are we? Grimwald's smile held. That, my king, is entirely up to your ribs. Rhaegar did not move his face. But somewhere inside his chest, the wolf inside him bared its teeth for the first time in 4 months. Because Grimwald had never referenced the ribs before. Not by name. Not directly. Not in daylight. Which meant Grimwald knew he had lost a piece of leverage. Which meant Grimwald had already been informed by Corwin about the East Tower reassignment. Which meant Grimwald had already begun to move. Which meant Rhaegar had hours, not days. Rhaegar did not blink. Rhaegar smiled a little, small, untroubled. The way a king smiles at a lord who has just laid a bad card face up on the table and does not yet know he has laid it. My ribs, Rhaegar said it quiet, are steadier this morning than they have been in 4 months, my lord. Thank you for your concern. Grimwald's smile did not change, but his left index finger did not move at all for the rest of the meeting. Not once. That was the tell. Rhaegar watched it. Grimwald had heard him. Grimwald had understood the reply. Grimwald was recalibrating. The council ran 2 hours. Rhaegar said little. He listened. He watched Grimwald's rings. When it ended, Rhaegar walked out slow, careful. Not too well, not yet. Because if he walked too well soon, Grimwald would panic. And a panicked snake bit faster than a patient one. He turned into the East Tower corridor and was sitting on the stair. Small hands. Small knees pulled up. Small paper folded on the flagstones beside her. She looked up Uncle. She had not called him that before. She had called him my lord, or king. Or, occasionally, just you. Nobody had told her to call him uncle, which meant Melis had told her. Which meant Melis had, sometimes between yesterday morning's broth and this morning's brace, sat her daughter down and given her the truth. In small words, in the simple way one gives truth to a child. Rhaegar's chest ached. Not the ribs, something else. Yes, little Wren. Mother says you are my father's brother. Yes, then why is my father not here? He crouched, his ribs held. Because your father died. Before you can remember him. He died because he was too kind. And a bad man was afraid of him. She thought about that. She was serious. She was 7. Which bad man? Rhaegar did not answer. He did not want to give her a face to hate yet. She was 7. Faces to hate were a heavy thing to hand a 7-year-old. I will tell you soon. He said it quiet. When it is safe, she nodded. She accepted it. She trusted him. He almost could not bear it. She held up the paper. Today's wolf. He took it. She had drawn him again. Bigger this time, under a different moon. And this wolf had teeth. Why teeth? He asked it soft. Because today he has to bite something. Rhaegar did not answer. He folded the paper. He tucked it into his inner pocket beside yesterday's drawing. Directly over the brace. Directly over the wolf who was, for the first time in 4 months, no longer sleeping. He rose. He went to Hoarfrost. The old mage was seated at his desk. His head was bandaged. His eyes were bright. I have riders on 12 roads. He said it without greeting. I have letters going to 7 households. I have a wet nurse in the Northern Lakes who is 72 and who has told her son she is ready to write. I have a priest in the Western Abbey who has been waiting to confess for 30 years. Give me 2 days, and I will have 3 scrolls that will hang a man. 2 days is all we have. Then I have exactly enough. Rhaegar sat on the edge of the desk. Grimwald will move before that. I know. My king. Then let him move. Let him overreach. Let him do what patient men do when they run out of patience. Let him panic. Hoarfrost looked up. You will bait him. I will bait him. How? Rhaegar almost smiled. He did not. I will heal in front of him. The old mage was quiet a long moment. That will terrify him. That is the point. If you terrify him, he will strike. If he strike, will he still strike wrong? And when he strikes wrong, we will have him. Hoarfrost set down his quill. He looked at his king for a long moment. You are your father's son? He said it low. He said it as a benediction. He says it as a small prayer of relief. I am my brother's brother, too. Rhaegar stood. Do not forget the second half. He left the study. He went back to the East Tower. He climbed the stair. He came into the outer chamber. Melis looked up from the fire, eyed her. You look different. My king. He did not answer. He came to her. He took the ladle out of her hand. He set it down. And he did something he had not planned to do. He did something he had, in fact, refused to do since the first night. He took her hand in both of his hands, slow, careful. Like a man handling a bird that might not stay. Her fingers were rough, warm, steady. Melis Thornhollow. He said it quiet. If I fall in 3 days, take Ren south. Do not stop. Do not wait. Do not mourn me on the road. Ride. Her eyes were steady. You will not fall. If I do, you will not, Melis. Say yes. She held his eyes for a long moment. No, my king. Her voice did not shake. If you fall in 3 days, I will run into that hall with a kitchen knife, and I will bury it in the neck of the man who put you there. And then I will ride. Not before. Not one heartbeat before. Rhaegar did not answer. He kissed the top of her hand. Once. Small. Not a kiss between a king and a widow. A kiss between two people who had signed the same parchment in the same blood in the same night. A kiss that closed a small door and opened a smaller one behind it. Then he let her hand go, and he went to the fire, and he warmed his ribs, and he waited for the next move on a board that had, for the first time in 4 months, more than one of his pieces on it. Grimwald moved that same afternoon, not directly. Grimwald never moved directly. He moved through a stable hand. The boy was 14, bright, new to the yards. He had been in service to the crown for only 6 weeks. Which was exactly enough time to know the layout of the East Tower, and not enough time to have anyone in the household who would notice if he did not come back from a shift. He was found at the 3rd bell of afternoon, at the base of the high loft in the west stable. Neck broken, body cold. The stable master reported it to the guard. The guard reported it to the steward. The steward reported it. Eventually, after a delay, Rhaegar noted to the king. Rhaegar received the news at the 7th bell. He was drinking Melis's broth by the fire. He set down the bowl. He rose. He went to the stable yard himself. He knelt beside the body. He touched the boy's throat. Silver. Faint. But there, silver wolfsbane in the neck. Which meant the fall had not killed the boy. The poison had killed the boy. And the fall was staged after. He looked at the stable master. The man was pale. My king. He was a good boy. He was quiet. He worked hard. He had a mother in the low city. Was he assigned to the East Tower last night? The stable master did not answer immediately. Answer, yes, my king. He was assigned. He was to bring hot water to the tower kitchen at the 2nd bell. He did not go. Someone else went instead. Who? A woman. My king. From the great kitchen. She said the boy had asked her to trade shifts. The boy had asked her. The boy had said, my king. So she said. She did not question. She was tired. She was glad Rhaegar did not need to hear the rest. The boy had been meant to deliver the poison bucket to the East Tower. The boy had, for whatever small reason, at the last moment, not gone. Which meant the boy had, for whatever small reason, at the last moment, refused. Which meant the boy had, without meaning to, saved the king. Which meant the boy had to die. Rhaegar stood a long moment in the yard. He put a hand on the boy's forehead. Cold, small. 14. Somebody's son. I will pay for your funeral. He said it quiet. To no one but the dead boy. I will pay your mother's rent for the rest of her life. I will make sure your name is in the crown's book of the honored. And when I kill the man who did this to you, I will do it slow enough that you would forgive me for it if you could see it from wherever you are, Rose. He walked to Grimwald's chambers. He did not knock. He entered. He found the old lord at supper with 2 of his men. Rhaegor did not sit. A stable hand has died. He said it flat. His neck is broken. There is silver in his throat. Grimwald did not blink. That is unfortunate. My king. Youth. Recklessness. The loft's high. He did not fall. Rhaegor kept his voice level. He was killed. I would not know, my king. I do not, my king. I do not keep the stable rolls. You keep everything. Grimwald smiled. Small, warm, untouchable. I keep everything I am asked to keep. My king. Rhaegor did not answer. He turned. He left. He did not go directly to the East Tower. He went to the crypt. He stood before the small plaque again. The fresh wolf lily was still there.
He did not touch it this time. He waited. He waited in the dim of the crypt for a long quarter-hour. He heard, eventually,
the soft footfall of an old woman coming down the crypt stairs. Slow, careful, a limp, a cane. She stopped when she saw him. She dropped to a curtsy, a very deep one. A palace curtsy from a woman who had been in service so long she remembered how to do it properly. My king. Rhaegor did not move. You lay the flowers, my king. 28 years, my king, how long? Who was he to you? She did not answer. Her hands trembled on the cane. He saw now over 80. Small, frail. Her wool cloak had been mended in 3 places. I nursed him, she said it low. For 11 days. You were the winner. I was the wetner. Grimwald's men, my king. In the dead of night, in the wet season. On a small boat, across the northern lakes, to the border of Stagholm. I was told the child would be safe. I was told he was being hidden from a plot. I was told he would come home when the crown was safe. You believed it. I was 22. My king. I believed anything my betters told me. Rhaegor was quiet a long moment. You have laid a flower here every week for 28 years. Yes, my king. Why did you come today? Because Elder Hoarfrost sent his understeward to me last night, and he asked me if I was ready to write my name. My king. And I said, yes, I have been ready for 28 years. I have only been waiting for someone to ask. Rhaegor closed his eyes. He crossed to her. He took her cane hand in his own. He bent his head to her forehead. He kissed her forehead once. A kiss between a king and an old woman who had carried a secret longer than the king had been alive. Thank you. He said it quiet. Thank you, mother. She wept. She wept the way old women weep. Silent. Small hole. Then she reached into the inner pocket of her cloak. She drew out a folded piece of parchment, dry, old, written in a careful shaking hand. She had already prepared it. She had, in fact, been preparing it for years. She pressed it into his palm. My testimony, my king. All of it. Every name, every date, every hand that touched the boat, every coin, every priest. Rhaegor looked at it. He looked up at her. You have saved my brother's daughter. He said it low. You have saved Iron Fang. You will not want for anything until the last day of your life. Nor your grandchildren. Nor theirs. She curtsied again. I only wanted to lay the flower, my king, on the right grave. Before I died, she turned. She limped away, slow, careful, up the crypt stairs, out into the low afternoon light. Rhaegor stood alone in the crypt with a folded testimony in his hand and a small kingdom of proof beginning to gather in a widening ring around Grimwald's throat. He walked out into the fading afternoon light. He walked slow. He walked steady, because for the first time in 4 months, he was not walking towards death. He was walking toward a hall and a ring of black stones. And a moment 3 days away, angle in which a patient old man was going to raise an ivory blade in a sacred circle. And this time, the king would not be alone in that ring. The next 2 days moved like weather. Rhaegor could feel them coming. He could feel them pressing on the tower walls. He could feel them tightening around the low city and the outer courtyard and every corridor of the castle. Grimwald had made his first bad move with the stable hand. He would make more. Panic did that to patient men. It cracked them along the seams they had spent 30 years smoothing over. Rhaegor did not push him. Rhaegor let the weather come. He held council in the morning as though nothing had changed. He walked the outer courtyard at noon as though his ribs did not hurt at all. He He spoke to the low market merchants at the third bell. He held audience with the treasury clerks at the fourth. He was seen. Seen everywhere. Seen well. Seen upright. Seen calm. Seen a king. Grimwald watched all of it. Rhaegar made sure of it, because every hour that Rhaegar walked at the castle looking whole, was not another hour Grimwald's calculations came apart. Grimwald had planned an ordeal against a dying man. Grimwald was now planning an ordeal against a man who might not be dying, which meant Grimwald was, for the first time in 30 years, running his own numbers with a shaking hand. The old lord had begun to make small mistakes. He forgot the name of the Western Granary Lord at council. He tapped his rings on the arm of his chair 3 times in 10 minutes, when he had for years tapped them only once an hour. He raised the matter of the ordeal twice in one afternoon. Each time he raised it more urgently. Each time Rhaegar let him raise it. Each time Rhaegar answered him with a small smile that said the soon day. Yes, of course. In 3 days, by the second night, the castle had begun to feel it too. Servants moved differently. Guards stood straighter. The kitchens hummed in a way they had not hummed in a season. A king was going to be tested in a sacred ring. A wolf king was going to stand where wolf kings had stood for 700 years. Every mother in Iron Fang knew what that meant.
Every child in the Low City knew what that meant. Every merchant with a stall in the outer square knew what that meant. Grimwald could feel it too.
Grimwald could feel that the Low City was quietly, without saying so, standing with the king, which was the worst thing that could happen to a man planning to remove him. Hoarfrost worked through both nights. The old mage did not sleep. His riders came and went in the small hours before dawn. Sealed scrolls arrived. Sealed scrolls departed. By the morning of the second day, the old mage had 3 signed testimonies on his desk. The wet nurse, the priest, the treasury clerk, all 3 sealed, all 3 witnessed, all 3 naming Grimwald in the same hand and for the same crime. Hoarfrost brought them to Rhaegar at the 5th bell of that evening. They stood in the tower chamber. The fire was low. Ren was asleep. Melis was mending a small tear in the girl's cloak by the light of a single candle. Hoarfrost set the 3 scrolls on the table. He did not speak. Rhaegar looked at them a long moment. Then he said, "Quiet. We do not open them." Hoarfrost tilted his head. "My king, we do not open them here. We do not open them in council. We do not open them until the ring." Rhaegar's eyes were steady. "Because if we open them in council, Grimwald will run. And if he runs, we chase. And if we chase, we lose weeks. And in weeks, he will find a new hand, and a new blade, and a new grave to dig. No elder. We open them in the ring, in front of the envoys of Stagholm, in front of every lord of Iron Fang, where Kiki cannot run, where the truth is not something we shout in a hallway. It is something we place at his feet." Hoarfrost nodded slow. "Then let me carry them." "You will carry them. If I fall, you will not fall. But if you do," Rhaegar's voice was low, "Melis will carry them." Melis looked up from the mending. She had heard everything. She did not startle. She only nodded once, as though he had asked her to bring another bowl of broth. "Yes, my king." Hoarfrost looked at her, at the mending, at the small tear in the small cloak. He did not say what he was thinking, but something in his face softened. "There is one more thing." He said it low. "Say it." "Grimwald has moved a purse today. A large purse. Out through the North Merchant, toward the border. My understeward believes it is higher. An assassin, not one. 2. Rhaegar did not move. For me, for you. And for the girl, Mazilis went very still. She did not gasp. She did not cry out. Her hand simply closed on the needle. Her jaw simply set. Then, Rhaegar said it flat. "We do not sleep in the East Tower tonight. We sleep in the crypt, behind the plaque of my brother. Nobody in this castle would think to look there. Nobody but the wet nurse knows the tunnel behind it. And she will not tell." Hoarfrost blinked. "There is a tunnel. There is a tunnel. There has been a tunnel behind that plaque for 200 years. I found it as a boy. I never told my father. I never told you. Why? Because I did not know then why I was keeping it." Rhaegar almost smiled. "Now I know why. They moved at the 9th bell. Melis carried Ren. Rhaegor carried a small bundle of the girl's things and his brother's knife. Hoarfrost carried the 3 scrolls in an oilcloth against his chest. The understeward guided them through a back stair only he knew existed. Down, past the wine cellars, past the salt store, past the small door behind the flour sack pantry that opened onto a stone corridor that had not been walked in 20 years. Rhaegar pressed at the small, hidden latch behind the plaque of Prince Aldrich Wolfsbane. The plaque swung inward. Behind it was a small room. Dry, cool, fitted with 2 low pallets and a lantern hook and a shelf of very old books. Rhaegor set Ren on the smaller pallet. He tucked her small cloak around her. She did not wake. She murmured something. Uncle. It sounded like she said uncle. Then she was asleep again. Melis stood in the doorway of the small hidden room. She looked around it. She looked at the 2 pallets. She looked at Rhaegor. You slept here as a boy. I slept here as a boy. Why? Because my father was kind. But my mother's death was hard, and there were nights I could not be in the tower. So I came here, and I slept beside her plaque. And I pretended I could hear her breathing. Melis did not answer. She only came into the small room. She sat on the 2nd pallet. She looked at him a long moment. Her gray eyes were very quiet. Then she said, Then let us sleep here again tonight, Uncle Rhaegor, beside your brother's name. And when we walk back up those stairs tomorrow, it will be the last time you or Ren or I ever have to hide. Rhaegar did not answer. He could not. He only nodded. He blew out the lantern. They slept, all 3 of them, behind a stone plaque in a crypt under a castle full of knives. And for the first time in 4 months, the King of Iron Fang slept the full night through. Because he was not alone. Because a widow was on the pallet beside him. Because a small girl who drew wolves was breathing quiet under a small cloak with 3 mended tears. Because behind that stone plaque, an old ghost of a mother whose son had come home was, in some way none of them could name, watching over them. Dawn came. They came up the crypt stairs into a castle that did not know it was about to be undone. Grimwald was in the great hall by the 2nd bell. Robed, silver braided, Warm smiled. The envoys of Stalm were seated at the eastern end of the hall. 2 of them, both older men, both had ridden through the night from the border. Their traveling cloaks were still on their shoulders. Their eyes were tired but sharp. They had come exactly because the rumor of an ordeal had spread that far, that fast. They did not want to miss what came next. 14 lords of the council were seated in the outer ring, sable-cloaked, ringed. Watching, the ring of black stones was empty. Rhaegar entered from the north. He was wearing the new brace under a plain wool tunic, under the wolf hide, under the ceremonial surcoat of the House Wolfsbane, with the wolf and moon embroidered in silver thread at the shoulder. His father had worn that surcoat. His grandfather had worn that surcoat. Every crowned alpha king of Iron Fang had worn that surcoat in the ring of black stones on the day of a sacred ordeal. He wore it now. He walked slow. He walked steady. He walked as though nothing in him hurt. Melis was not in the hall. Not visibly. She was behind a pillar at the western entrance. Ren was hidden behind another pillar closer to the eastern door. She had a small kitchen knife in her sash, and she had been told, very seriously, not to come out unless her mother came out first. Hoarfrost was seated in the outer ring with the 3 scrolls in an oilcloth against his chest. The understeward stood behind his chair. Rhaegar reached the ring. He stopped. Grimwald bowed. Warm, deep, untouchable. My king. Today, before this council and before the honored envoys of Stagholm, you will affirm the strength of the Wolfsbane line by taking the shape of the great wolf, as every crowned alpha king has done since the founding of Iron Fang. Rhaegar said nothing. He waited. Grimwald smiled a little wider.
Whenever you are ready. My king. Rhaegar stepped into the ring. The cold of the black stones came up through his boots. Old cold. Older than the castle. Older than the crown.
Older than the poison in his blood. The ring had been laid before Iron Fang was a kingdom. It had been laid when Iron Fang had only been a hill and a pack. Every crowned Alpha King had stood in the ring at least once. Every one of them had shifted. Every one of them had shown the wolf. Rhaegar closed his eyes. He reached inside, down past the ribs, past the brace, past the folded drawings over his heart, past the small hot pulse that had been growing there for 2 days. To the wolf was awake. The wolf was full awake. The wolf had been waiting. The wolf came up. His bones moved. His shoulders dropped. His face changed. His skin flowed. He felt his hands close and open and become paws. He felt his spine lengthen. He felt his teeth. He felt his teeth. The great white wolf of Iron Fang came down onto the black stones on 4 paws. He stood. He shook his head. He looked at Vareth Grimwald across the ring. The hall did not breathe. The envoys of Stagholm did not breathe. The 14 lords of the council did not breathe. Grimwald did not breathe, because the king of Iron Fang was standing in the sacred ring on 4 paws for the first time in 4 months. And the old lord's entire long, careful plot had, in the space of a single indrawn breath, been undone. The wolf padded to the center of the ring. He raised his head. He howled once, long, high. Not a howl of triumph, a howl of return. A howl that said, to every wolf in Iron Fang who had wondered these 4 months whether the pack still had a head, that yes, the pack had a head. The head had teeth. The head was home. The howl carried out of the great hall, out through the open doors, out over the outer courtyard, out into the low city. Every wolf in Iron Fang who could hear it stopped what they were doing. Every mother in the low city set down what she was holding. Every child in every window turned their face toward the castle. Every merchant in the outer square went still. The kingdom had a king again. Grimwald knew it before anyone else. Grimwald knew it in the exact moment the howl left the wolf's throat. Grimwald did what patient men do when they have finally run out of patience. He panicked. He drew the ivory blade from his belt, small, ancient, the kind that had ended more than one king in Iron Fang's history. He stepped into the ring, which was forbidden. No lord was to step into the ring during an ordeal, not one, not for any reason. To step into the ring during a king's ordeal was, by the oldest laws of Iron Fang, an act of open treason. Every lord of the council rose, not to strike him, only to stand, only to witness. Grimwald did not see them rise. Grimwald was looking only at the wolf. He raised the blade. The wolf's ears flattened. The wolf's shoulders lowered. The wolf's yellow eyes locked on the old lord's throat. The wolf did not move, not because he could not. Not because he did not nide, because from behind a pillar at the western entrance of the great hall, Melis Thornhollow was already running. She did not scream. She did not shout. She did not warn. She came fast. She came low. She came with the small woodsman's knife her husband had once carried in his belt, the one with 2 crossed-running wolves carved on the bone handle. She did not stab Grimwald. She caught his wrist, both her hands. Full weight, full body. The ivory blade froze one hand's breadth above the wolf's raised head. She looked up at Vareth Grimwald, and she said one word, Aldrich. The old lord's face changed because he had not known she was in the hall. He had not known she had come. He had not known the widow of the woodsman on the border was here, in his castle, in Wolfcrest wool, with the knife her husband had carried when Grimwald's men had come for him 4 years ago. The name landed on him like a stone. His hand went slack. The ivory blade clattered onto the black stones. The wolf stepped back. He shifted. His bones moved again. His skin flowed. Rhaegar Wolfsbane stood in the ring of black stones in the ceremonial surcoat of his fathers, with Melis Thornhollow's small kitchen knife still hovering above his shoulder. He raised one hand. He set it gently on her wrist. Enough. He said it quiet. Just for her. She lowered the knife. She did not step back. She stayed at his shoulder. Because if Grimwald moved Gadsden, she would move first. And every lord in the hall could see that, and every lord in the hall would remember it. Aegarig turned to the outer ring. Elder Hoarfrost stood. Slow, carefully. his bandaged head held high. He walked into the ring with 3 sealed scrolls in his hand. He set them on the black stones between the king and the accused. He broke the seals one by one. The first scroll. His voice carried sworn testimony of Mother Idris of the Northern Lakes, age 72. She was wet nurse to Prince Aldrich Wolfsbane on the night of his supposed death. She swears in her own hand that no prince died in her arms. She swears that a servant's child died of the fever in that same room. She swears that a substitution was made. She swears that Prince Aldrich was carried out by boat across the door of Stagholm and placed in the care of both woodsmen. Grimwald did not move. The second scroll. Payment ledger of the royal treasury, signed and sealed. 100 gold pieces released to a boatman on the night of the substitution. For a passage north, signed by, he looked up, Lord Vareth Grimwald. The silence was so complete, Rhaegar could hear the snow settling on the outer courtyard. The third scroll. Confession of Brother Cale, Western Abbey, age 81. His hand shakes now, but his memory does not. He confesses that he was paid to perform the funeral rites for an empty coffin. He confesses that he was paid to lie in the sight of the crown. He names the man who paid him. Horfs did not need to say the name a third time. Grimwald had not moved. Grimwald was not smiling. Grimwald's rings were bright in the torchlight, cold, untouched. And still, Rhaegar looked at him. You paid for the murder of my mother. His voice was so quiet the envoys had to lean forward to hear him. You paid for the disappearance of my brother. You did not manage the murder of my brother. My brother lived. My brother grew. My brother married. My brother had a daughter. And then, 4 years ago, when you learned my brother was still alive, you paid for his murder a second time. Silver Wolfsbane. On the border, in a woodsman's cottage. He died in 11 days. Of a wife who is standing at my shoulder now. He looked at her, whose knife was faster than yours today. Grimwald's mouth opened. Once, Grimwald's mouth closed. The 2 envoys of Stagholm rose slowly from their seats at the eastern end of the hall. They did not speak. They did not to. They had come to witness an ordeal.
Witness the exposure of a 30-year conspiracy in the space of one indrawn breath. They would
every word of it home to Stagholm by nightfall. Every kingdom on the continent would know by the end of the week. Grimwald turned. He ran. He made it 4 steps toward the eastern door. On the 5th step, Wren stepped out from behind the pillar, small, solemn, charcoal on her fingers. Her small kitchen knife untouched in her sash, because she had not needed it. Because her mother had come out first. She stood in the doorway. She looked up at Grimwald as he came at her. She said one word. Uncle. Not because Rhaegar had told her. Not because Melis had told her. But because when a small child in a corridor sees a frightened old man running toward her, she reaches for the only word she has been given for old men in this castle. And Rhaegar had, 3 nights before, told her that she had an uncle in this castle. He had not told her which one. He had wanted her to know she had family. He had not wanted to give her a face to hate yet. She said the word by mistake. She said it because she was 7. Vareth Grimwald froze. Because even a man rotten to his heels has a moment in his life when a small child looks up at him and calls him uncle. And in that moment, even if he has ordered the death of a queen, even if he has ordered the disappearance of a prince, even if he has slowly poisoned a king for 4 months. He hesitates. He looks at the small charcoal hand. He looks at the small serious face. He sees, for one very short breath, his own younger self. Before the coins, before the rings, before the choices that had built him, the hesitation was the second the guards needed. 2 of them took him from behind. Wolf-crest cloaks, iron-bound arms. He did not resist. He could have. He was staring at Wren. He was staring at his own long life laid bare in the eyes of a 7-year-old who did not yet know his name. She stared at him. She smiled a little. Uncertain. She held up a fresh piece of paper she had folded in her free hand. I made you one too. Grimwald did not answer. The guards took him out. The eastern door closed behind him with a sound like a book ending. Rhaegar did not move for a long moment. He then hung across the hall, slow. Every step was a small negotiation with ribs that were tired now, that were done, that had held for exactly long enough. He reached Ren. He knelt in front of her. He did not lift her yet. He only took the small, folded piece of paper from her hand. He opened it. She had drawn a small old man, silver beard, rings on all his fingers, standing under a small moon, beside a small wolf. The wolf was licking his hand. Rhaegar looked at it a long moment. You drew him kindly. She looked serious. He is my father's brother too. She said it slow, as though thinking it out for the first time. So he is my uncle too. Yes. But he is a bad man, yes. Then why did you draw him kindly? Because, she thought about it. Because maybe if I drew him kindly, he would be kindly. On the paper. Where it does not hurt anyone. Rhaegar closed his eyes, because there was, he realized, more understanding of the world in a 7-year-old's charcoal drawing than in any book he had read in 20 years of being a prince and 4 years of being a king. Because she had already understood, at 7, what most men did not understand at 70. That the paper was a place a person could try to be someone different. That kindness on paper was still kindness. That even a bad man might have been drawn kindly by someone, once, if only someone had thought to. He lifted her. Slow, his ribs held. He turned. Still holding hold to the 14 lords of the council, to the 2 envoys of Stagholm, to every eye in the great hall of Iron Fang. This child, he said it steady, is Ren, daughter of Aldrich Wolfsbane, my brother, granddaughter of the queen who was murdered on Grimwald's coin. She is of my blood. She is heir to Iron Fang. Let no lord in this hall ever say he was not present when this was spoken. The council knelt. Not to him. To her, and Ren, tucked against a shoulder of a king she had drawn as a wolf, whispered one small thing directly into Rhaegar's ear. The whole hall did not hear it, only he did. Uncle, you are warm. Rhaegar closed his eyes, because she had felt it too. The trial began 2 weeks after the ordeal. Rhaegar insisted on a public trial. Not a secret one, not a quick one, a slow one, in the great hall, in front of every lord, in front of every servant, in front of any wolf of Iron Fang who cared to enter and stand at the back of the crowd. He wanted the light on it. He wanted the record to be long. He wanted every child born in Iron Fang for the next 100 years to be able to open a ledger and read exactly what had happened, and who had done it, and who had answered for it. Grimwald was brought in each morning, in chains. He did not resist. He did not speak. He sat in the low box the crown carpenter had built for him. He looked at his own hands. He waited. The testimonies were read one by one. The wet nurse, the priest, the treasury clerk. A second treasury clerk who would come forward on the 5th day. A midwife's ledger. A merchant who had once transported a small coffin. A boatman's grandson who had inherited his grandfather's careful, guilty diary. Each one added a small stone wall being built around Grimwald. By the end of the 2nd week, the wall was too high for any man to argue with. He confessed on the morning of the 3rd week. He confessed because Ren came into the hall on that 3rd morning, because she had asked to, because Melis had said no 3 times, because Ren had said please 4 times, because Rhaegar had finally asked Melis. Perhaps the child understood something the adults did not. Because Melis had finally allowed it. Ren walked up the box. She stopped at a respectful distance. She looked at Grimwald. She said one small thing. Very quiet, very serious. Why did you kill my papa? The old lord wept. He wept the way old men weep when they have run out of everything they ever built. He wept for a long time. Then he told the truth. In front of 80 witnesses. It took 2 hours. It covered 30 years. It began with a queen's wine at a summer feast when Rhaegar had been 7 years old. It ended with a woodsman's cottage in a rainstorm 4 years ago. He named every hand he had ever hired. He named every coin he had ever paid. He named every lord who had ever, in any small way, looked away. Rhaegar did not interrupt him. Rhaegor did not let anyone interrupt him. When it was over, Grimwald bowed his head. He did not ask for mercy. He did not ask for a trial by combat. He did not ask for anything. He only once, at the end, looked at Ren, where she stood by her mother's side, and he said, "Quiet. You should not have called me uncle, small one. I did not earn it." She looked at him a long moment. She said, very serious, "I know." That was the last thing she ever said to him. He died 2 weeks later, in the Crown's dungeon. He did not take his own life. Rhaegor made certain of that. Rhaegor doubled the guard on his cell. Rhaegor ordered his food tasted by 3 different tasters. Rhaegor wanted him alive to serve out his sentence in front of the kingdom that had watched him nearly break it. He died of an old man's heart. Simply, quietly, in his sleep, on a Tuesday morning. His last breath was witnessed by 2 guards and a physician. There were no shadows. There was no drama. He was 58 years old, and he had carried 30 years of poison in a bloodstream that had, in the end, decided it was done carrying anything. Rhaegor did not the disposal of the body. He did not send word of it to Melis. He did not tell Ren. He only, that evening, walked to the crypt alone. He stood before the smock of Prince Aldrich Wolfsbane. He knelt, brother. He said it low, to the empty crypt, to no one, to everyone. He's finished. Your daughter is safe. Your wife is safe. Our mother's murder is answered. I will not pretend it is enough. I do not think it is ever enough. But it is what a man in my chair can do, and I did it. And I will keep doing it for the rest of my life. So sleep well now, wherever you are, because someone in Swirled Sazzle finally on watch for your family. He says he stayed a long time on his knees in the crypt. He did not weep. He had done his weeping 4 months ago in an empty great hall at the 4th bell of night. He stood up. He put a hand on the small plaque. He turned. He walked out. The healing was slow. Rhaegor's wolf came back in pieces. Not all at once. In careful cracks. In small, brave flowings. He shifted a second time on the 7th day after the trial. Only for a heartbeat. He shifted a 3rd time on the 12th day. Only in the tower yard. Only at moonrise. Only with Melis at a window, watching. Ran asleep in the crook of her mother's arm in hoarfrost, seated on a bench with the small under-steward, who had by now been formally appointed as steward in Corwin's place. Corwin had disappeared the night of the ordeal. Nobody had ever found him. Rhaegor had not tried very hard to. Some accounts closed themselves. Some accounts a king learned not to reopen. By the 2nd month, Rhaegor was shifting nightly. By the 3rd month, the wolf could run. By the 4th month, he ran the outer walls of the castle in the dark and did not need to stop. By the 5th month, Melis stopped rebuilding the brace. By the 6th month, she burned it. In the tower kitchen fire. Slow, careful, piece by piece. The dragon hide first, then the linen padding, then the silver at the last. She burned it alone. She did not tell Rhaegor she was doing it. He came in for supper that evening and only knew because the smell of burnt leathers was still in the air. He did not comment. He only sat and ate his broth and said, quiet at the end, "Thank you." She looked up. "For what, my king? For every ratchet you loosened. For every night you did not answer to the wrong name. For every drawing your daughter made me. For 6 months of standing in a doorway with a bowl of broth when I could not have carried myself to a table." She looked at him a long moment. "You did not have to say that." "My king, I know." "Kings never say those things." "I know, then." She was quiet. "Then thank you, my king, for being the king who says them anyway." That was the whole exchange. That was, in some way, the whole story. 6 months after the ordeal, Iron Fang looked different. Not in the walls, not in the towers, not in the low city. Those looked the same stone still. Slate still. Wolf crest banners still hanging at every gate the way they had hung for 700 years. The difference was smaller. The difference was in the corridors. Servants walked upright now. Guards spoke to each other in the yard again. The kitchens had begun to hum a low working hum that Rhaegor had not heard once in 4 years. 3 of the 14 lords of the council had quietly withdrawn to their own lands. 2 others had quietly sent their sons to court to serve. The understeward, now steward proper, had cleaned 9 rings of rot out of the palace staff in the first 3 months and had not made a public speech about any of it. He simply had not called those names back to work. Rhaegar walked the wall each morning, not out of duty, out of appetite. The wolf inside him liked the wall. The wolf liked the wind at the parapet. The wolf liked the way the low city looked from a height at dawn. Rhaegar had, for 4 months of poisoning, forgotten what appetite even felt like. He was learning it back now, in small pieces, in small mornings. He was 34 still. His ribs held. His left hand did not go numb. His shoulders had begun to sit at their proper height for the first time since his coronation. He had, without noticing it, put on weight. Melis had noticed. She commented on it exactly once in passing over a bowl of broth. "You are eating." "Yes." "Good." That was the whole of it. She did not go further. She did not make a thing of it. She rarely made a thing of anything. That was, he had come to understand, one of the great and quiet mercies of her. She had not accepted a title Rhaegar had offered. He had offered on the day after Grimwald's confession. He had offered on the day of the first shift in the tower yard. He had offered on the day the last testimony was signed and sealed and placed in the Crown Archive. He had offered each time without ceremony. He had offered because it seemed to him the right thing to do. He had offered because Iron Fang had, for the first time in 700 years, no clear precedent for what to do with the woman who had run into a sacred ring with a kitchen knife. She had refused each time, not sharply, not proudly. She had refused the way she did most things, quietly, without argument, only with a small shake of her head and a return to whatever pot she was tending at the time. Once, on the last of the 3 offers, she had said only, "My king." I did not stand there for a title. I stood there for a wrist. If I take the title now, the wrist becomes a smaller thing. And I do not wish it to be a smaller thing. Rhaegar had not asked again. He had, however, made her a title of his own, not queen, not consort, not steward, not any of the shapes Iron Fang already knew how to wear. He had, in the small, quiet ceremony of one evening in the tower chamber, with only Hoarfrost and Wren and the understeward as witnesses, named her guardian of the blood. It had no precedent in the annals of Iron Fang. It was, in every meaningful sense, the shape of what she had already been for 6 months. He had only put a name to it. He had put it in the Crown Archive. He had made it hereditary in the female line. He had done all of that without making her curtsy for any of it. She had accepted the parchment. She had folded it once along the fold he had left for her, and had tucked it into the small chest under the fireside, beside the parchment with 2 thumbprints on it that they had both signed in blood on the first night. Neither parchment had been mentioned by either of them since. Both were still there. Both would stay there. That was, in some way, the shape of them. Wren was a declared heir at Summer Council, formally, on the record. In front of the treaty envoys of Stagholm, she wore a small silver circlet. She did not like it. It slipped over her ears twice. She was 7. She fixed it with the same small, serious hands that had once drawn a wolf on the back of a grain slip. The circlet was set aside after the ceremony. Wren went back to charcoal. Wren went back to the tower yard. Wren went back to her small drawings. She was learning to read red now. Hoarfrost was her tutor. The old mage sat with her 3 afternoons a week in the tower kitchen with a slate and a piece of chalk and a very small stack of primer books that had once belonged to Rhaegar himself when he had been a boy of 6. She was faster than Rhaegar had been. Hoarfrost mentioned this only once, only in passing, only as though it were the weather. Rhaegar had smiled small and had said only, "Good." The cough had begun to fade by the 4th month. Melis had at first not trusted it. She had been through false thaws before. A herb helped for a week, then failed, then a bad winter, then another herb, then a bad month. She had watched her daughter breathe wrong for so long. She did not know how to trust breathing that went right. By the 5th month, Wren coughed only in the evenings and only light. By the 6th month, Wren did not cough at all. Melis noticed it one morning. She noticed it because she had woken at her usual hour, the 5th bell, in the small chamber off the tower that had been made for her by the understeward as her own. She had woken because she was accustomed to waking every morning to Wren's small, dry, rattling breath through the wall. There had been no rattling breath. She had come out of her chamber fast. She had opened the door of Wren's little room. The girl had been asleep, deep, peaceful. Small chest rising and falling like the chest of any healthy child anywhere in the kingdom. Melis had stood in the doorway a long time. Then she had turned. She had gone down to the tower kitchen. She had lit the fire. She had set the kettle. She had cut the bread. She had done all of it in silence. She had done all of it with hands that did not shake. She had done all of it while quietly, without any sound, tears had rolled down the sides of her face and into the collar of her wool shift. Rhaegar had come in for breakfast at the 6th bell. He had seen the tears. He had said nothing. He had only, after eating, set his bowl down and walked around the small table and put one hand, briefly, on the top of her head. Just once. Just a moment. He had not said anything he had not needed to. She had reached up. She had squeezed his wrist. Just once. Just a moment. She had not said anything either, and that had been the whole of the morning. That had been in some way the whole of the healing. Hoarfrost died in the 9th month. Not badly. He died the way old men should die and rarely do, in his own bed, in the Mage's tower. With a book open on his lap, with a cup of hot wine cooling on the small table beside him. With the last of the evening light coming through the west window onto his silver beard, Rhaegar found him in the morning. Hoarfrost had been dead perhaps 4 hours. His face was peaceful. His hand was still on the book. The book was open to a passage he had underlined in his careful old hand many years before. Something about the shape of a wolf's paw in soft ground. Something Rhaegar did not read at the time. Something Rhaegar read later, in private, alone. With one hand pressed to his mouth, he gave the old mage a full royal funeral. Every lord of Iron Fang came. Every wolf of the Low City came. The understeward, now stewards, spoke first. Rhaegar spoke second. He spoke for a very long time. He did not weep during the speech. He wept afterward, in the tower chamber, on the wolf fur bed, with Melis holding his hand, with B. Elise against his side, with a small mended cloak folded on the chair by the fire. Hoarfrost was buried in the crypt, not near Rhaegar's father. Rhaegar put him near his brother, near the small plaque that read Prince Aldrich Wolfsbane, beloved, 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 because Hoarfrost had, more than anyone else in the castle, kept his eyes on that plaque for 30 years. Rhaegar felt he ought to keep him near it now. The wet nurse came to the funeral. She had grown thin and slow, but she came. She stood at the back of the crowd. Rhaegar saw her. Rhaegar sent a page. The page brought her forward to stand at the king's shoulder for the last of the rites. She did not curtsy this time. She was too old. She was too tired. She was too much of a mother. She only put a small hand on Rhaegar's arm as the crypt was closed. "He is with your brother now," she said it low. He was, in some way, watching over the same child for the 30 years. Rhaegar did not answer. He put his own hand over hers. That was the whole of it. Winter came again. Not the winter of the poisoning. A different winter. A quieter one. The snow fell soft. The wolves in the Low City stayed close to their hearths. The kitchens made stews with root vegetables. The understeward, now steward for a full year, had begun quietly to teach Wren the shape of the ledgers she would one day have to keep. She did not like ledgers, but she was serious, and she wrote in a small, careful hand that was neater than any hand at court, and she learned. Rhaegar turned 35. He noticed it only in passing. Melis brought him a small cake. Wren had baked it, mostly, under supervision. It was a little burnt on one side. Rhaegar pretended not to notice the burnt side. He ate it whole. He was standing on the top wall that afternoon, watching the snow. The wolves on the crest above the gate glinted in the low light. He was warm inside the wolf-hide cloak. His ribs were quiet. His hand did not shake. He had, without noticing it, forgotten what it was to count how many years he had left. He had begun, without noticing, to count how many years he had had so far, which was a very different arithmetic. Which was, he had come to understand, the arithmetic of a man who was no longer dying. Small bare feet came running along the wall behind him. He did not turn. He held out one hand. Ren tucked her small hand into it. She had grown. Not much. A little. Her hand was still small enough to fit inside his without any effort, but it was less small than it had been. He noticed it. He did not comment. Uncle. Yes, little Ren. Steward Farron says I am going to be a queen. Yes. Then who will draw the wolves? I will draw the wolves. You cannot draw. I will learn. You are too old to learn. Rhaegar almost laughed. He did not. But he almost did. Then you will keep drawing them. He said it quiet. And I will keep being them. And your mother will keep loosening the ratchets when she thinks I do not notice. And that is how kingdoms are held. She thought about that. She was serious. She was 8 now, which was, according to her own reckoning, nearly grown. She nodded. That is a good deal. Yes, little Ren. That is a good deal. She was quiet a while. The snow fell around them. It caught in her dark hair. It caught in the fur at his shoulder. It did not seem to bother her. Then she said, Small, uncle. Yes, if my father were here. Would he like me? Rhaegar did not answer for a long moment. Then he crouched. He was slower crouching now. Not because his ribs hurt. Because he's wanted her to see his face straight on. Because a promise from a king to a child had to be given at eye level. Or it was not a promise at all. Yes. He said it low. He would like you. Because you are what he tried to be all his life without ever knowing it. Kind and quiet, and the sort of person who does not tell everyone in a room what she is thinking, but who thinks and notices and remembers. He would like you. He would have taught you to whittle small birds. He was very good at that. There's one of his under your pillow already. Your mother made me put it there the night we came out of the crypt. Because she wanted the first birthday you would ever spend as an heir to have one small thing in it from him. Sneered at him. She had known about the bird. She had thought her mother had left it. She had not known her mother had made him do it. Something small and old cracked in her face. She did not cry. She was 8. 8s do not cry easily. But something inside her chest, the small tight muscle that had been holding a father-shaped absence for 4 years, unclenched a fraction. She nodded. She said only, Thank you, Uncle. He kissed her forehead. He stood. They watched the snow together a while longer. Then she said softer, I like the ratchets thing. He almost laughed. He did not, but he almost did. I know. She scampered off, but down the wall stair, back to whatever project she had been in the middle of before she had come to find him. He watched her go. Small dark cloak. Small serious posture. Small hands still charcoal dusted at the cuffs. He turned back to the low city. Melis was in the tower door below. He could see her small figure. She had come out to watch the snow. She was wearing one of his wolf fur cloaks. She had begun, in the last month, to steal them without asking. He had not once mentioned it. She had not once acknowledged it. He raised a hand to her. She raised one back. That was in some way all they had to say to each other most days. It was enough. The winter passed. The second summer came. The kingdom of Stagholm sent envoys again. Not for a treaty. For a state visit. Their king had, in the interim, sent a private letter to Rhaegar asking quietly whether the story of the ordeal and the girl and the widow and the wolf that had come back after 4 months could possibly be true. Rhaegar had written back only 2 lines. Yes, come and see her yourself. The Stagholm king came in person. He stayed a week. He met Ren. He met Melis. He met the wolf. He asked no questions after the second day. He sat in the tower kitchen on the 3rd evening and drank Melis's broth, like any traveler at any hearth. He left on the 7th morning with a small folded drawing in his saddlebag that Ren had made him. It was a picture of two wolves under one moon, one large, one small. Standing side by side, he carried it home. He framed it. He in it in his own great hall. 200 years later, it was still hanging there. It was the only thing in that hall a child had drawn. Every subsequent king of Stagholm left it where it hung, because the story attached to it was, by then, the sort of story kingdoms did not throw away. Rhaegor did not know any of that would happen. He only knew the drawing had gone in a saddlebag, and that a king had ridden home smiling, and that Iron Fang quietly, without ceremony, had entered its first true peace in 3 generations. Some of that peace was because of the wolf. Some of it was because of the widow. Most of it, though, if you asked the wet nurse before she died in her small cottage in the 5th year of the reign, was because of a very small girl with charcoal on her fingers and a serious way of tilting her head when she considered a piece of paper. The old woman said that once, near the end, to no one in particular, to the fire in her small hearth, the world turns on quiet children. She had said it low. All the noisy kings only think they run it. Then she had gone to sleep, and she had not woken up. That was the last thing she had ever said out loud. Rhaegor had it carved into the small stone that marked her grave. The world turns on quiet children. Anyone who visits the crypt of Iron Fang can still read it there. 3rd row, 2nd stone, west wall, just below the plaque of a small prince who had in the end died. Rhaegor Wolfsbane ruled Iron Fang for 34 more years after that first ordeal. He did not remarry. He did not need to. Melis lived in the Tyus Tower, or more precisely, in the small chamber the understeward had built for her, off the tower, which was by everyone in the household understood to be her chamber. She kept her own small stove, her own small store of herbs, her own small chest of parchment and mending, and the small carved bird her husband had made for their daughter a lifetime ago. She and Rhaegor did not marry. They did not announce anything. They did not require any lord of Iron Fang to name what they were. The lords stopped trying to name it around the 5th year. They simply began to refer to her, in official records, as Guardian Melis. That became her title. That was the whole of it. She learned to read in the 7th year. Ren taught her. That was, in the family, considered slightly amusing.
Melis was not amused by it. Melis learned faster than either of them expected.
By the 10th year, Melis was writing letters to the wet nurse's family in her own hand. Ren grew. She grew tall. She grew serious. She grew quiet. She grew into a woman who kept a small charcoal stick in the pocket of every gown she owned. She grew into a queen-in-waiting who had, by 15, read every ledger in the Crown Archive and asked the steward twice why the ledgers of the western granaries were still being kept in the old way that Grimwald had preferred. The steward had, on the second asking, changed the ledger system. She was crowned at 24, not because Rhaegor had died, because Rhaegor had, in his 50th year, quietly decided that a wolf that could still run should probably stop pretending to sit on a throne all day. He gave her the crown. He kept the wolf. He walked out of the throne room on the day of the coronation. He walked to the tower yard. He shifted. He ran. He ran for 7 years. He walked the low city as a wolf in the evenings. Children left small pieces of bread on window ledges for him. He did not eat them. He always came back. He always came back to the East Tower. Melis always had broth. Ren always had a ledger question. He always had a small, folded drawing in the inner pocket of whatever he was wearing. He died in his 68th year, in his own bed, in the East Tower, in the small chamber he had shared, more or less, with a widow and a girl and a story for 34 years. He died the way Hoarfrost had died, peacefully, in sleep, with a cup of hot wine cooling on the small table beside him, with a book open on his chest, with Melis in the chair beside the bed, having fallen asleep in her own reading, and with Ren, now 41 and Queen of Iron Fang, seated on the low stool at the foot of the bed with her small charcoal stick still in her hand from having, an hour before, drawn one final sketch of him. She had drawn him as a wolf, under a moon, with a small dark bird tucked between his front paws. She did not know why she had drawn it. She had not drawn one for years. She had, that evening, felt the urge. She had done it. She had set it on the small table beside the cup of wine. He did not. The drawing was under the name. He had, at some point in the night, reached out, taken it, held it against his chest, and gone. Melis did not weep at the funeral. She had, she said quietly to her daughter afterward, done all her weeping in advance. She said it plainly. She said it in the tower kitchen. She said it while Wren, 41 years old and a queen, wept into her mother's shoulder with the same small dry sobs a 7-year-old had once made into a wolf hide by a fire. Melis outlived him by 4 years. She died at 74. In her small chamber off the tower, in her sleep. With one in hand around the small folded parchment with 2 thumbprints on it that they had in the first winter signed in blood. Wren was there when she went. Wren held her hand. Wren kissed her forehead. Wren whispered one small into her mother's hair as her mother slipped away. She whispered, "Thank you for loosening the ratchets. For all of us." Then Melis was gone, and Wren was the last of the story. She ruled Iron Fang for another 23 years. She was, by every account, an excellent queen. She never married. She adopted 7 orphans from the border villages over the course of her reign. She raised them all. She had, until the day she died, a small charcoal stick in the pocket of every gown she owned. She died at 64. She was buried in the crypt beside her uncle, beside her mother, beside a small plaque that had once said Prince Aldrich Wolfsbane and now said, in an edition made after the ordeal, "Rest with your brother, rest with your wife, rest with your daughter. All are here." That is where the story of Iron Fang could end. But that is not quite where a good storyteller lets it end. Because you did not come to this fire to hear about a crypt. You came to hear a story. And a story is not over until the person who has been listening to it has been given something to carry home. So, come closer, sit down. This is because the fire is still burning, and the king of Iron Fang is not really gone, and the widow is not really gone, and the small brown wren is not really gone. They are only, all 3 of them, in a story now, which is a different kind of being here. Which is the kind of being here that only works if the person hearing the story does the work. You are the person hearing the story, so the work is now yours. Come, listen. There are a few things worth carrying home from a fire like this, and I would not be a good storyteller if I let you leave without them. There is a king in your own life. Maybe he is your father. Maybe he is your brother. Maybe he is your son. Maybe he is you. Maybe he is the man in the mirror at 57, at 62, at 70 years old, with his shoulders held too high and his ribs held too tight and a strap of dragon hide he has been wearing under his shirt. For so long he does not remember he is wearing it. That king is bleeding silver too, quietly, where nobody looks. He has been doing it for years. He does it because he was taught that a king does not gasp. A king does not weep. A king does not lean forward until his forehead nearly touches the arm of his own throne. He does it because nobody in his life ever quite got around to walking into his tower with a bucket of water and looking at his ribs instead of his face. There is a first thing worth carrying home from this fire. Real strength is not the ability to hold your ribs together for 4 years while your kingdom watches you smile. Real strength is knowing when to let one person, one steady person, one healer's daughter in a scorched apron, walk into your tower and see you as you are, not as you have pretended to be. Real strength is the courage to let yourself be helped. Most men who have ever sat on any kind of throne, in any kind of house, in any kind of life, have died a little every day of the years they refuse that help. Do not do that. It is not necessary. The world is not saved by the man who dies well of his own silence. The world is saved by the man who lets his lower ratchet be loosened before it kills him. There is a second thing worth carrying home. It is about legacy. Grimwald wanted the throne. Rhaegar did not want the throne. Rhaegar wanted his brother's daughter to grow up. That was all. That was the whole thing. The story turned on that, because the man who wants a chair will always lose to the man who wants a child. Legacy is not the shape of the crown you leave behind. Legacy is the shape of the small hand you kept warm. So if you are, in whatever chair you are in tonight, counting the years you have left, count them in warm hands, not in gold, not in acres, not in titles, not in names on a granite stone in a family plot. Count them in the small, serious faces that have, at some point in your life, tilted their heads at you the way a 7-year-old tilts her head at a piece of paper she is trying to draw a wolf onto. That is the whole ledger. Everything else is Grimwald's arithmetic. And Grimwald died alone. There is a third thing worth carrying home. It is the hardest one. It is about who to trust. Grimwald sat next to the throne for 30 years. Melis stood next to it for 6 weeks. And when the blade came down, it was the 6-week woman who caught the wrist. That is because the length of a friendship is not the measure of it. The measure of it is whether the friend puts their body between you and the knife when the knife comes. Some of the people closest to you would not do it. Some of the people you barely know would do it without thinking. Learn the difference. It is the most useful thing a man can learn in the second half of his life. Do not be afraid to look at the ledger of the people around you and quietly move a few names from one column to another. It is not disloyal. It is not cynical. It is only honest. And most men, by the time they reach 60, have earned the right to be honest with themselves about who has actually stood at their shoulder. Do it while there is still time to say thank you to the ones on the right side of the page. Do it while there is still time to build a smaller table with only those people at it. That is what a good second half of a life looks like. A smaller table, a shorter list, a warmer fire. There is one more thing worth carrying home. It is not exactly a lesson. It is more of a question. How many kings in our own lives are bleeding silver behind their armor? Right now, tonight, waiting for one quiet person to simply see them. Waiting for a small hand to draw them whole. Waiting to be given permission to be afraid in a kitchen before they walked the stairs. And how often have we, ourselves, been the person who was supposed to be that quiet witness and looked away because it was easier to look away? Think about that.
Not tonight. Not at this fire. Later. Tomorrow morning. In the kitchen of your own house.
When you are pouring your own coffee. Look at the person across the table from you. Ask yourself whether you have looked at their face this month. Not glanced at it. Looked at it. Looked long enough to see, if it is there, the small silver seep at the seams of the braid they have been wearing under their shirt for so many years they have stopped noticing. If you see it, say something. You do not have to say the right thing. You only have to say something. Rhaegar Wolfsbane did not need Melis to say anything clever on the first night. He needed her to say 4 words. Your ribs are bleeding. That was enough. That was, in fact, everything. Because it meant somebody had finally seen, and a man who's finally been seen does not die that same year. He usually gets up and walks slowly and begins to heal. In pieces, in careful cracks, in small, brave flowings. Everybody you love is carrying a brace. Some of them have been carrying it so long they have forgotten what breathing feels like without it. You are somebody's Melis. Right now. Tonight. Somebody in your life is sitting in an east tower, waiting for you to walk in with a bucket of water and notice. Go be Melis. That is all. That is the whole thing. That is why this story exists. If you have been the man who carried a wound no one knew about, or the man who finally let someone else see it, or the woman who once walked into a tower with a bucket of water and saw a king bleeding under his silk. Tell us your story in the comments below. Tell us who your Melis was, or who yours could still be. Tell us about the small hand that drew you as a wolf when you did not feel like one. Tell us about the ratchet somebody once loosened for you when nobody else had thought to look. Tell us about the wet nurse in your life who carried a secret for 30 years just so it would be waiting for you when you were finally ready to ask. Somebody reading this comment section needs to hear that story. Somebody reading it is still in the tower, still braced, still bleeding silver. And a stranger's few honest lines might be the loosened lower ratchet that saves them tonight. That is the whole point of stories like this one. Not to entertain, to loosen. Stay strong. And when it is your turn to sit on any kind of throne in any kind of life, sit on it.
But when it is your turn to walk into a kitchen with a bucket of water
And see a man for the first time in 4 months,
walk in, because there is a wolf in you, and the wolf is warm, and it only needs one person to notice.